Mushroom Hour. Today on Mushroom Hour, we're excited to interview Saga Mariah Sandberg. Saga Mariah grew up roaming the forest surrounding her family's farm in Sweden. Her curious nature as a child is largely responsible for the remarkable works of art that she produces today. Her art has been described as authentic, beguiling, captivating, and perhaps above all, a beautifully curated celebration of Sweden's natural systems. Beyond just faithfully recreating beautiful forms from the natural world, Saga Mariah is an accomplished naturalist who has a deep understanding of the wondrous life forms and biotopes that she is so beautifully rendering in her artwork. She shares in a Swedish cultural lineage that has passed down ancient traditions when it comes to wild food, mushroom foraging, and a reverence for nature. It's clear that she was born of the forest and has grown into an incredible ambassador for this environment to which she belongs. Saga Mariah, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for helping me with the real pronunciation of your name. I hope I did it a little bit of justice.
Well, you did very good, I would say. Swedish is a difficult language to pronounce.
It is very different from our English with the pronunciations. So I will be leaning on you the entire interview when Swedish words come up. And apologies to any Swedish listeners. I'm trying my best.
You're doing good. You're doing good. I'll be here to help you out.
Well, there's so much to talk about. You gave me a ton of great information on Swedish history, the relationship with nature, the mythology and the folklore and the stories and all those things I love, especially when it comes to mushrooms. But I do want to start off with introducing everybody to Saga and talking about your early life and really how it influenced where you are today, how you developed a relationship with nature early on. And feel free to pepper in some amazing stories about collecting creatures from the forest and things like that I really enjoyed reading.
Oh yeah. I had the marvelous opportunity, as most Swedish people do, of growing up on the countryside. And not only on the countryside, I grew up on a farm, an old farm with my family that was really in the middle of the forest. It was kilometers away from the nearest neighbor. And sorry for everyone listening to this podcast who are from America. I will probably use really strange measurements like centimeters and kilometers and miles, Swedish miles and weird stuff like that.
Sweden has different miles.
We do. 10 kilometers is a Swedish mile.
But there is something that is so reassuring about the metric system in that the numbers are divisible by 10 and seem to make sense.
Yes. We have like liters, milliliters, deciliters. Yeah, it's sorry. It's going to be a ride, guys. I grew up in the middle of the forest, kilometers away from any neighbors. So I was probably pulling my mom's skirt all the time. So she would always tell me, go into the woods. Just go into the woods and leave me alone. I would venture out without anyone guiding or guarding me or herding me. I was just free to explore things on my own, which was super lovely because from an early age, I was super fascinated by everything creepy crawly, everything small that would crawl around our house. I just loved it so much. And especially my first love was ants and stink bugs. I loved stink bugs. And if I saw one, I would follow it around to, what's he going to do? You can hear that. I mean, we didn't have much entertainment.
Well, it sounds like some of your earliest friends were arthropods and insects. There's nothing wrong with that.
Oh, yeah, right? I mean, they couldn't talk, but I was chatty enough for 10, so I could fill out the emptiness with my own chatter. And I would follow the ants around our house. And I could early on see that there were different kinds of ants, which gave me much joy. So inside our house, we had some black ants. That's what they're called in Swedish. Svartmyror. And the outside house, we had the wood ants, the bigger ones, who are a bit red and black, who build big nests, stacks.
Yeah.
The black ones I would follow around in our house, and I heard that they liked sugar. So I would plant some feeding stations around the house for them with like syrup. My parents were like, why the hell do we have so many ants? Where did it come from? They had to investigate. They looked around and they found my feeding stations. Oh, not happy about that. They found them and they confronted me. They were like, this must be your doing. I was like, oh yeah. So I kind of lured in ants to our house. That's where it started. And then I just went on exploring more and more from there. And I started bringing stuff inside, which I was not allowed to, but I thought I could outsmart my parents. For example, we had this potato patch that we would leave barren every other year, fill it up with like horse dung, then use it the next year. Anyhow, from this horse dung, I don't know what it's called in English, we call it kväve. It changes the soil and makes it very invitable for a lot of different plant species. So we would have loads of nettles growing in this. And nettles, they will invite butterflies. So I saw these fussy little caterpillars on the nettle leaves, and I just couldn't help myself, I gathered a whole bunch of them, and I also plucked leaves from the nettles. I brought them all inside my room and hid them in my bookshelf. Just a few days later, they had made little cocoons hanging all around my room, and I was super pleased.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was so pleased. Like a week or two later, they would all hatch on the same day. So when I woke up in the morning, there were these butterflies all over my bedroom. And I was amazed. And I could see them climb out of the cocoons and sit on something and like dry their wings. They were all like wrinkly, the wings, as they were born out of their cocoons. And my mom would later come in and she would be mortified to find like 15 butterflies in my room.
You were creating your very own ecosystem in your room.
Yeah, I think I was around like 7 years old, maybe 6 or 7. Wow. So she opened the window and she was like, come on, we need to get them out of here. They can't be in here. I was like, oh, you party pooper. I thought they were going to live here with me now. So yeah, I did all sorts of things. So then I was banned from interacting with animals inside our home.
Oh.
Yeah, but I found my ways. For example, I would collect slugs and I would make little homes for them in different buckets in our garden. So one day when my dad needed one of his buckets, he was like, why is there a lid on this bucket? And he opened it and it was full of happy fat slugs. And he was like, no! And one day, this time was pretty angry with me actually. He found a bucket in one of our outhouses. I don't know what you called like sheds.
Like a shed.
Yeah. No, well, we had like, you have the pigsty and you have the house where you do all your wood cutting. In Scandinavia, we have long winters, being the Arctic region and so. So you have a house for all your chopped wood.
I can see that happening in Sweden. Here, we did not have a house for our chopped wood, but I'm with you. I'm following.
Yeah. So anyhow, he went into this to get some wood, and there was a bucket of snakes that I have collected.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
Yeah.
What everyone wants to find in their woodcutting shed, the bucket of snakes.
Exactly. And I was like, don't worry, they're not poisonous. And he was like, you're 8 years old. How do you know? I was like, yeah, I guess I didn't.
I just think this gives such an amazing insight into your spirit and who you were when you were young. Not only this fascination with nature, but really like such a curiosity and a lot of bravery. When I was hearing these stories, that's pretty brave for a young child to start playing with snakes and picking up slugs. And, it really speaks a lot to who you are. So I just really am so grateful you laid out those stories to give us an idea of what Saga is like.
Little Saga, she was not afraid of anything.
Clearly not.
A little bit of fear would have done good, I think, because we do have poisonous snakes in Scandinavia. We have the viper.
Vipers?
Yeah, I think they're called adder. You have black adder, and you have the adder with the zigzag pattern. Luckily, my mom has already taught me from a young age that the zigzag pattern snake, you stay the hell away from that.
Good. So they equipped you with some knowledge already. So, when you're out exploring, you're being as safe as you possibly can be.
Yes. I grew up in an area called Varmland where they're famous for their mooses. We have a lot of mooses, and we have a famous strain of mooses that are white. They're not albino. I don't know what it's called in English, but there's these kind of white animals, like you have the white bear in Canada.
Yeah, okay, so
they're not thing.
Yeah, they're not albino, but the species is a white variety. I've never seen a white moose before.
They're super majestic. You can Google it. You can Google like white moose.
You already know that I'm going to Google white moose. Everybody listening is going to Google white moose.
They look insane. And they only live in the region where I'm from. They're famous for this particular place.
And that's Varmland.
Yeah. So there's lots of so-called dangerous things in the forest, apart from snakes. We have bears and wolves, lots of wolves.
Mm.
But they're, modern days they're not very keen on people. They hear you and they'll try to stay as far away from you as possible. So I've never really had a wolf encounter. They do leave half-eaten animals on my parents' lawns sometimes.
I thought you were about to tell us that you had all of your wolf pups that you were raising from a child, and you were...
I wish. I wasn't industrious enough, clearly. I should have tried to round up some wolf pups while I was at it.
Thankfully, you didn't, for your mom's sanity, if nothing else. And I think it's pretty clear that, this was your universe. This was your entertainment. In American culture, so much of our young lives are spent, especially nowadays, with electronics and devices. And it seems like that was not very much part of your life, and kind of nature was everything.
Yeah, it was. We had a telly, but the thing is, Scandinavia overall is a weird place because it has a little bit of like the Eastern European culture in it, and then it has its own things and so on. So politically, we're pretty communist, as the Americans would say. So, like, when I grew up, there were 3 TV channels, only 3. 2 of them were what we called educational channels that would only show like documentaries on things that the government would think would be good if we knew about. Right. Like famous people or anything, like how to make wellies, like how to make boots, how to make rubber, like any documentary. That's what they would show.
Doesn't sound like government brainwashing. That sounds like useful things.
Yeah. And then you had another channel, and this channel, it would show children's shows, but only 1 hour a day. It was not even an hour because they always had like 15 minutes of introduction, which was boring. And then they would have 45 minutes of cartoons.
And that was it?
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
Oh my gosh.
Same time every day, except the weekends. Because you should be outdoors on the weekends, right? You shouldn't be watching telly. So that's the only entertainment I had. So, of course, stink bugs and ants.
Yeah, quickly you have to turn to the stink bugs and the ants to give you that excitement, that entertainment. But there's obviously so much good that comes out of that. And our culture that went kind of completely the other direction, that became very focused on entertainment. Our Saturday mornings were full of 6-hour binge watching on cartoon shows. And I think now we're starting to see some of the effects of that. And we're trying to transition to blend in maybe more time in nature, more time outside, realizing, which we all intuitively probably should know, that kids need a balance and not just TV all the time. But I think it really just gives great insight into how you got where you are now, and makes so much sense that you're basically this forest spirit because you grew up in the forest and were communing with it from, when you could walk. Is this something that was unique to you, or do a lot of Swedes have that kind of intimate relationship with nature?
A lot of us, I would say. Most of us who didn't grow up in bigger cities. Mm. But the thing is, we have something called sommarstuga here, which means summer house. So people living in the cities, they have a summer house. And this is because we're in the Arctic region. So winters here are very, very dark. We have around like 3 hours of daylight in winter.
Oh, sure. Sure.
While in summer, we have 3 hours of night instead. But it's not really dark in summer. It looks like the sun is up in night and the birds are singing and everything. So since we're so deprived of sunlight in the wintertime, it's part of our culture to take at least 1 month off in the summer, preferably July. So like Stockholm, our capital, is basically like a ghost town in July because everything's closed, like small shops are closed, the offices are closed, everyone is at the summer houses, which is somewhere else. Maybe it's outside Stockholm, maybe it's further up if, you know, you have relatives further down or further up in Sweden, you go to that summer house and you stay there for a month.
Maybe even in Varmland.
Yeah, exactly. They could come to Varmland.
I think there are other hints that show how integrated nature is into Swedish culture, and particularly wild food and foraging. I had heard stories about special laws in Scandinavian countries that allowed, and actually I believe this is true for other Baltic countries like Estonia and some other countries, that there are rights to forage, even on private property. I may be pronouncing this wrong. Allemansraten, the rights of all men.
Yeah, this is almost right. Whenever we have like an A with a dot or 2 dots over it, they signify a specific sound. So the A with 2 dots, it's the Ä. So it's allemansrätten. Yeah, and it means all man's right. And it means that every man has a right to roam, the freedom to roam. And you're correct. Most Nordic and some of these European countries, they have this freedom to roam. And in Scandinavia, it also means you have the freedom to camp anywhere you like. For one night, you don't need permission to camp. You can camp on someone's lawn, basically.
Which is kind of
part of the package.
Well, it's a little bit foreign to, you know, our country where there's so much about private property. Now, obviously, people camp on other people's land and it's totally fine. But I think just the fact that they've legislated that and made that a law that you have that right just hints at a culture that places the importance of nature really high on the list, that people should be able to have unfettered access to nature regardless of property boundaries and who owns what. The idea of property or land ownership, to some people, it's a little divisive, and is that at the heart of a lot of inequity and things that we see. But anyway, I just think it's great that they've made sure that people always have access and don't feel trapped by those kind of property rules and things like that.
Yeah, as a Swede, as a Scandinavian, it's so unthinkable that someone would stop me from going into the forest. I mean, even if a person owns the land, he's not there, is he? You know, like, I mean, but it's also, this is an ancient customary law for us. So it's been here like since forever. And also we're quite small population in a quite big country. So, you know, there's much, much more forest than there's people here. So it just works out very well for us.
It's true. You may not run into the same problems when there's so much forest where everyone can basically be out there roaming.
And it's not a new Scandinavian, Sweden, it's not a new country. You know, we've been here since the Stone Age. So America is different. South and North America, they have been around, in quotation marks, for so long, the way they are today. So you have to kind of explore as you go. What is this country? How do we want to run things here?
That's a really good point. You mentioned before, maybe there's some of the things that we would consider communist about being an open society and being a more trusting society comes with a society that's so well established, that's kind of figured things out, that it's easier to build something where trust is kind of inherent in the political system, and you have a more open system where you can trust the government a little bit more. I think it makes sense that you would see a more communal societal structure to a society that's been around so long.
Yeah, we haven't had any civil wars, you know, so, I mean, we trust each other, we trust our government, and it's worked out well for us. So we trust that they make good decisions. And if they don't, I'm sure we'll let them know.
Well, and I've taken us off the track. The rights of all men does give people a right to forage, correct? They can forage for wild food as well?
Yes. You can go out into the forest and you can forage whatever you like, except roots of plants. Because many plants, they won't grow if you steal the roots. So you can't take the roots.
Right.
And you can't pick protected species. But most edible things, they're not protected species, and there's such an abundance of mushrooms and berries that you don't have to try this super rare thing, it's why there's so much else to eat. So yeah, it's worked out good for us.
Mushrooms and berries are everywhere. With that kind of limitless supply, you don't run into the same problems that we see in some other countries, including the States, where people can go through and essentially clear cut the wild food in an area to where you have to implement laws or restrictions. Here in Northern California, there are state parks where you are legally allowed to mushroom pick, but there are weight limits and things like that. Has your system seen any exploitation, or is it still largely, so abundant that people can pick however they want?
I can totally see why you would give people a limit if it's a necessity, like you explain. I mean, I have to kind of bring up some stats, I think, that Sweden is Europe's 5th largest country, and it's covered of 70% of forest. And we only have a population of 9 million people, and 1 million of them lives in our capital, and the rest are spread out. I mean, we're so scarcely populated that even if everyone here foraged, which they do, you hardly ever run into anyone else. You have your own family spots that are passed down generations where you pick your mushrooms and berries, and that's something that is respected. Other people be, oh no, that's their mushroom place. We can't go there. We don't want to feud. Since we have so much forest and so little people, there's been foraging tourism in Sweden. There's a lot of people coming from other countries to pick mushrooms and berries. And for some years, we had problem with foreign groups who organized commercial picking, and they would employ thousands of underpaid pickers from Eastern Europe and the Balkans. Our government has now formed unions for these pickers to make sure that they are actually better paid and that they follow the regulations that we have. Because they would set up camps where they would live for a couple of weeks, and they didn't know how to take care of the litter, or that they had to. So they were contributing with a lot of litter. And the funny thing is, we were not that berries. We were much more worried about litter. We didn't want them to leave like plastic and beer cans and things like that would end up on a poor wolf's pup's foot,
Yeah, you didn't think you were going to run out of mushrooms and berries, but you didn't want trash littering the forest. I mean, the way you're describing it, I can see why there would be a lot of foraging tourism. I want to go there. I love the sound of this society and this foraging society, and that idea that family mushroom picking and berry picking spots are passed down. It's another one of those traditions that you really would have in a much older culture, probably, than a newer one. And so I'm sure there have been spots passed down from ancient times, even prehistory. And I love hearing about that.
Oh, yeah. Especially when it comes to berries and bracket fungi and goodness, I don't know where it's got peat. You have peat bogs. We exported a lot of peat back in the day.
Oh, okay.
So you have these ancient foraging sites for these kind of places.
Does your family have mushroom picking spots and wild food spots that have been passed down maybe from your mother or father? Yeah.
It's the natural progression. Yes. We even have sayings in Swedish for the place you pick your berries or your mushrooms. We have specific words for that.
Wow.
And these are secret places. You wouldn't tell anyone outside your family. You don't want them to come and take your mushrooms, or take your berries. So you wouldn't tell them. God, no, God forbid. You keep it to yourself. And my mother, her knowledge was passed down from her parents, especially her great-grandfather on her maternal side, which is my great-grandfather.
Great-great-great-great-grandfather. Yeah.
Great-great-great-grandfather. So my grandfather, my mother's father, he was very much into mushroom foraging. His name was Kurt. And then my mother's grandfather, and his wife, Gustav and Anna, they were huge foragers. So both her father and her grandfather and mother, they would bring her out and teach her mushroom foraging and berry foraging. And they would pass down their places, which she still keeps to herself. Well, I know them now. So she would go out with them from an early age, like when she was 5 years old, maybe, to start foraging. So when she was 9, I actually phoned her up before talking to you on this podcast. I phoned her up and asked her, like, Mom, when did you start foraging on your own? And she was like, oh, I remember it clearly. I was 9 years old the first time I went out on my own. And I picked 20 liters of chanterelles. I was like, could you carry that? And she was like, yes. And my father was so delighted when I came home.
Oh my, that is such an amazing story. I thought you were going to say you had to phone her up to see what you could talk about. Like, Mom, is it okay I even talk about the family mushroom spots?
Oh yeah, but I won't tell you where they are. I won't disclose the location.
20 liters of chanterelles that for a 9-year-old, I mean, she's found more mushrooms at 9 years old than I have maybe in my life.
It's crazy. But she picks hundreds of liters of mushroom each autumn. Wow. Hundreds.
When did you start mushroom foraging? Were you also from like 9 years old?
I was too young to remember. I mean, when I was old enough to walk longer distances, she would just bring me out into the forest. Well, I've done the same. I don't have any children of my own yet to pass down this to, but I have brought my friends' kids to my mushroom spots to teach them, and I think they were like 4, 5 years old.
I wish I was taken out from 4 or 5 years old and shown the forest and shown the wild foods, because I think that taps into something. When you're out with your family, your folk in the woods, finding things, activating that like foraging circuitry that we have in our brain. There's something really special about that. Oh yeah, it's something so like ancient. I don't know if I have the right word for it, but there's like something triggered in you, when you do it. It's just like, I have to pick all these to survive. You get it. There's something that like kickstarts it, like, yes, and then I have to do it again tomorrow. You get kind of obsessed with it in a nice way. That's why people get addicted to it, is you are tapping into some kind of ancient programming about finding things in the woods. Especially when you talk about a mushroom like chanterelle, it's also this beautiful golden beacon that you just want more of in your life.
Oh, yeah. Goodness. Well, we call it the forest gold.
It is that. Now, is this story we're talking about, is this pretty unique just to you guys there in Varmland, or would a lot of Swedes share this story about passing down this history of mushroom foraging, going out with their family?
As soon as Swedes released their old superstition about mushrooms, because we're not like the Eastern Europeans who've been picking it since like forever. When we stopped being scared of mushroom, let's use the word scared, it's not really the best word, superstitious about them, we became a huge mushroom loving country. I mean, I'd say it's the same with Norwegians and especially Finns. Finns are like semi-Scandinavian, semi-East European. They have the best of both worlds, which makes them the best people.
They've got mushroom hunting in their bones.
Yes.
Now, why were bracket fungus so important to ancient Swedes and modern Swedes? And what kind of bracket fungus are we talking about?
Oh, this is a great topic. We clearly differentiated between the mushrooms and the bracket fungi. The bracket fungi was something else. That we thought that was like a knob on a tree, like something that the tree would give us to do something with. So since the Stone Age, you mostly use them as tinder, to make a fire. And there's several fungi, like bracket fungi, that are really, really suitable as tinder. And you can tell by the names in Swedish, they're called like fire bracket and tinder bracket. And that's what we still call them today. It's like fire starter bracket. So
it's kind of the last thing people think of when they think of a mushroom is starting a fire or any kind of flammability. We've heard more and more stories, including the story of Otzi, the ancient Iceman, and how he had tinder fungus in his pouch. This is one of the oldest fossils of modern humans that we found, and he had tinder fungus in his pouch. And it sounds like they also used it like as a material too.
Yeah, you could do so many things with these. It's such a peculiar thing, actually, because when you look at them, you're like, does it look like a good for nothing lump on a tree? And you could do so many things with them. Like here, we use them as medicine. We used them to make clothing out of them. We would use them to make bottles and bottle corks. We would use them for basically anything. Oh, and bandages. They were huge in healing because you would dry them. And the fibers in the fungi, when they are dry, they're almost like paper-like. So then you can flatten them and you can turn them into bandages. And these would absorb blood and make it coagulate in a way, made them very beneficial as bandages.
So you're using these bracket fungus for everything.
Yeah.
And there was a group that you sent to me, which was the Sami people.
Yes.
And so were they kind of the ones who started using this, or does the history go back even before that? Or
that's super hard to know. Scandinavia has been populated since the Stone Age, but more populated since the Iron Age, and we don't know how the interactions between the indigenous people and the Scandinavian people, like us Germanic people, what it looked like back then. We don't know.
Right.
But we could have picked up loads of wisdom from them, definitely. Maybe I should mention what fungi we're talking about. It's called Fomes fomentarius. I know we will pronounce these extremely differently.
No, that's exactly how we pronounce it. Fomes fomentarius. And that's the fungus that you end up making amadou out of, correct?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah, because a lot of people know Paul Stamets. He wears a special mushroom hat that's made from amadou, and everyone thinks that's just the coolest thing in the world. And it is. This is something that's been embedded in Swedish culture.
Oh, that's so cool. Of course he has a mushroom hat. Yeah, I mean, here's people still pick them. I mean, we picked them when I was a kid and used them as tinder in our fireplace. I think people still make clothing and decorations out of them.
So there's still a connection to those ancient traditions. Even now, the mushroom is still incredibly useful for those things.
You can totally tell by the names that we still call them, like fire, bracket, and our word for amadou is fnuske.
I'm not going to try to pronounce that one.
Fnuske. I'm sorry, we have a lot of consonants next to each other in Swedish, which doesn't make sense for English speakers. But fnuske is what you call dry things that you would make a fire from. So this is fnuske bracket. It's I think the most well-known bracket in Sweden.
This is only found in the wild as far as I know, but because it was such a useful resource, did anyone try to cultivate Fomes fomentarius or fnuske or any of these bracket fungus?
They sure did. They were widely cultivated in Scandinavia hundreds of years ago. What they did was that they went out and they studied what trees do they prefer to grow on. So you would take saplings from these trees and you would plant copses with these trees, only to wait for the bracket fungi to come. And in Sweden, we usually planted the Swedish white bean, which is a tree native to Sweden only.
Okay.
It's very preferred by the tinder fungus. They grow very large and very numerous on this tree. And in Denmark, they had a technique where they would plant beech trees. And when the beech trees were a few years old, they would tie the top of the beech tree to the ground, creating an arc. So it would be easy to forage the bracket fungi later. They would just grow on these arcs. So you didn't need a ladder or anything.
That's genius. And it just tells you how important these were, where someone would have the patience to wait for a tree to grow and then for the fungus to actually inoculate the tree. And, this is a years-long process they're doing to try to get these bracket fungus.
It's cool. But also tree planting is very old here. You would plant trees so your children's children would have wood to build their houses from. Like you would plant a copse of oak trees and you would say this is for my children's children's children. Later they will be like, our great great grandfather, he planted these for us to make a ship from. Vikings had ships also. So you have specific trädkännare, as we call it, tree knowers, let's say, wood knowers, people who could knock on wood and listen and know this wood is great for ship. No, this wood is not. This tree will be good for a house. Like they could just tell what kind of quality the wood had.
So trees hold a very special place in Swedish culture as well.
Yes, they do. They do. Most of our surnames are tree names. Like you would be called Oak as a surname, or Aspen.
I really like that tradition. I want to have my last name be like Redwood Tree or something like that. Sempervirens or something.
Oh, it's super normal here. Like the thing is, surnames here, according to Scandinavian tradition, they're not something you pass down. They're something you change according to who you and your family are at this time. Like, who are you and your family? You might not be doing the same as your grandfather's family, so you change it. So you would take on the name of either the environment around you, or like if you would grow a copse of oak trees, you would call yourself Oak Copse. We are the family Oak Copse, Or if you lived by a certain scenic place, that would be like a beautiful inlet or something, you would actually call yourself Inlet as a surname.
Oh, I like this. I like this culture. I like this naming structure. I love having nature so integrated. There's something really exciting and organic and alive about a kind of culture that's so in tune with nature like that and willing to adapt to the natural world around them and really integrate it into their life. And obviously it works because you guys have been there since the Stone Age.
Yeah.
Clearly this way of living works well.
Yeah. I mean, so you can change your surname anytime you want here. My sister's family, when she got married, they decided on their family name, like what are we going to be, and one day when I get married, I will hopefully do the same if my husband wants to. We will choose a family name for us together that represents us.
Well, and as someone who's, so affiliated with all these different plants and mushrooms and bugs, that's going to be a hard choice for you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to be like Saga Mariah stink bug. Saga Mariah ant hill.
Yes.
Ant feeder.
That's amazing. I do want to make sure we cover you as an artist, because now we've got an idea of why you be so into nature and animals and mushrooms and plants. When did your journey as an artist really begin? You were born in the woods and you've been in nature since day one, but when did your journey as an artist begin?
As a kid, I started to sketch and draw all the things I saw around our farm. We had chickens and ducks and cats and things like that, and I really loved our ducks and our cats. So I would do little studies of them. My mom, she gave me a diary to practice writing when I was 6 or something. And I just started drawing in it instead. Instead of writing a journaling, I would draw some pictures.
Yeah. So
she would continue to buy little diaries for me, and I would fill them up with drawings of especially our pond. We had a pond in the garden where the ducks swam, a pond full of carp, fish as well, and ducks and toads. And I love to draw everything I saw in it. So my parents could tell that this is something that came naturally to me.
Yeah.
My mother, she's been doing handcraft her entire life, traditional Swedish handcraft. And my grandmother on my father's side, Kerstin, she's an artist. So she had her own studio and she painted and she did exhibitions and things. So my dad drew the conclusion that, okay, so pointing at me, this person, this is where it all ended up. Because none of my siblings, they showed the least interest in doing anything creative. And I'm the youngest one. So my parents were like, this is where it all ended up, in this person.
All so that lineage of art and everything channeled into you.
Apparently. So they really encouraged it because they kind of anticipated at least one of our kids should be creative. Because my grandfather was a sculptor as well. He was a welder. Is that what you call when you have a flame and you put
a welder? Yeah.
Welder. Okay.
Yeah.
He was a master welder. So on the side of being that, he did sculptures out of metal scrap that he welded together into, listen to this, giant insects. Beautiful giant insects. It looks proportionally perfect. It would be what are these big wussy things called in English that are by lakes?
Dragonflies.
Yeah, dragonflies. He would make huge dragonflies.
So nature was his muse too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he would carve stuff out of wood. Like, I'm showing Darren a moose.
She's holding up a beautiful carving of a moose.
Yeah, that's my grandfather made. So he made mushrooms as well.
I see that. A beautiful mushroom.
I believe.
Oh, a porcini. Yes.
Yes. So he was creative too, and my mother, she's really, really good with handcraft. So they bought me paints. I did my first painting with acrylics when I was 7, thanks to my mom, because she bought these things for me.
So you had the environment where they were cultivating your artistic talent. They saw it pretty soon, and they started giving you the resources you needed to really cultivate it. And I saw in your notes that you had your first proper art exhibition as young as 11 years old.
Yeah. I was so embarrassed because integrated deeply in Scandinavian culture, this is actually back to the Viking age. It's very, very ugly to brag, to be boastful, to promote yourself is seen as something like it's not humble. You know, you should be humble to a fault. You should be ridiculously humble. So I was so embarrassed when my parents decided to hand my paintings in to the principal of a school. They handed him like 10 of my paintings and he said, "We need a solo exhibition for this girl." And I was like in a melting stage. I was like, no, I thought it was so scary. But there were these black and white studies that I had made out of ink. My dad, he had been awarded a fountain pen by his work. Being the curious person I wasn't allowed to touch it, but I touched it and I painted with it. These were the paintings. So they were black and white fountain pen studies of cats and flowers. That was my first exhibition. And
you managed to survive the embarrassment.
Yeah, I did. I learned to handle it better.
Well, it shows that you had a lot of talent from an early age and you were lucky enough to have parents that were keyed into the arts that really wanted to cultivate that in you. Plus, it doesn't hurt that you're brave and you have a free spirit and you're willing to steal that fountain pen to make your art if you have to.
Sorry, Dad.
As you're growing and progressing, did you find any mentors, maybe even people that were just artists that were inspirations? You know, they weren't mentors that taught you one-on-one, but kind of these mentors in art that you latched onto, or maybe you did have in-person teachers as you progressed.
Yeah, I was fortunate to have that. My mother and father, they hooked me up with a local artist, so I could be like an apprentice. Once every other week. They bought lessons from him. So they would drop me off and he would teach me and a couple of other kids that were a bit older than me the basics of painting, you know, like chiaroscuro and stilleben and things like that. May make sense to anyone who knows art who are watching. I mean, it's basically you're just grinding the student into learning things by replicating boring stuff. Like stilleben is when you put a bunch of bottles and fruits on a table and you go, paint them from this angle. Good. Now paint them from that angle. Good. Now paint them from this angle. Okay. Now I'm going to evaluate what you've done. You did this and this and this wrong. Now paint it all again with this new knowledge in mind. And then you just do it over and over again. It's like when you're going to learn an instrument, you do like scales.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. It's the same.
It's developing those technical skills you need.
Yes. So you learn how to work a pencil, a brush, you know, you would draw the same boring stuff with different techniques. So you'd be like, now do it with charcoal. Now do it with watercolor. Da, ba, da, ba, da. And then he could tell that I was very good with watercolor. That just came natural with me. So my parents later, after a year with this guy, they hooked me up with a watercolor artist, a local watercolor artist, and this old man. And he would teach me. He was pretty strict.
Now, I was going to say, was he strict or did he let you paint your ants and stink bugs, or is it more kind of boring still lifes?
He actually didn't care what I painted as long as I did it properly. Technique was everything.
Okay.
And I am so incredibly grateful for this. I wouldn't be this good today if it wasn't for this. But he didn't care if I painted puppies or parrots. So I was having a bit more fun, but he was also very strict. So I had to like repaint something a couple of times. But I was so enthusiastic. I mean, it didn't put my spirit down. I was just like, yeah, I'll do it again. Yeah. You know,
like paint those puppies again? Of course.
Parrots. I painted so many parrots.
Oh, wow. So did he have parrots or where did you find parrots to paint?
He had parakeets, like cockatiels.
Yeah.
So when I turned 12 or 11, my parents actually bought me a cockatiel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I named him Hugin after one of the ravens that Odin had. You know, the Norse god.
Yeah.
Odin, he had 2 ravens. One is called Hugin and one is called Munin. Hugin means your inner wisdom, and Munin means your mind. You know, your gut and your mind, kind of. Yeah. The gut instinct and your mind. That's what you need to be wise, the Old Norse thought.
Yeah, it's important to have that gut intelligence, that gut sense of things.
So my gutsy cockatiel.
Well, and this is all quite young. I mean, you had a lot of artistic training from a young age, and did that translate to academic studies? You know, as you got older, did you pursue studying design and art?
In Sweden, you have like high school when you are 13, 14, 15 years of age. Mm-hmm. Then after that, there's something like senior high school, sort of, when you are 16, 17, 18, which we call gymnasium. It's or gymnasium in Swedish, which is a German way of schooling.
Okay.
So our school system works like this. You are supposed to be able to move out of your parents' house and work at the age of 18. When you're 16, 17, 18, you get a chance to study something which you can actually have as a profession. You choose here. You choose what you want to become already. When you're 15, you make a choice. So I chose art school. So I went to art school when I was 16, 17, 18. I mean, you can do anything. You can do engineering, nursing, hairdressing, whatever, you know. So you can start working and providing for yourself when you're 18.
And that's funny because when you think a lot of kids here in America, they don't know what the heck they want to do at 15 years old.
I know, it's tough. It's a problem here too. So you have something, you can study more broader subjects, you know, like humaniora, you know, like languages or something. So you can then later specify better.
Right.
You know, you have nature science as well. But I studied art, and being who I am, a weirdo. I've always been a weirdo. I have had a little bit problems with social rules as a kid. I just did whatever I felt like. So when I started the art school at 16, I went to the principal and I asked her if I could take away some subjects and also study biology, because I wanted to study both art and biology.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I can remove all the math, but you have to promise me that you're not going to change your mind and become like a consultant or, work with economics or be a lawyer or something later, because this is going to put you and me in trouble. And I was like, no, I promise. I'll be this weird artist for the rest of my life.
You're like, don't worry. I know this is what's for me.
Yeah. So she hooked me up with field biology classes. Because in Sweden, there's also it's the amount of educational hours that you get that's important, not like what it is. It's that you study all. Yeah, I already had some freedom to choose, but it wasn't good enough for me, of course.
You can't be free enough.
No.
Saga can't be free enough.
No. So the field biology classes I took, they were in summertime and they were outdoors. And they were on the university level, as we call it. And that was the best thing I ever done in my entire life.
Because you already love nature. Outdoors. Yeah, you already love nature. And then you got to put this incredible knowledge base behind that, where you intimately understood not only from kind of that gut level or that emotional level of how nature made you feel and your own observations, but pair that with a scientific understanding.
Yes.
Basically.
Awesome. It's so awesome. So as I told you, you already had some freedom, so you could choose some stuff to specialize in. I chose photography. So I had classical art every day, painting.
Yeah.
Then I had photography, which was not digital. It was analog photography. So I learned to develop so I had that. And then I had field biology. So today I utilize all this knowledge that I have. I use my photography skills and I paint. And I also use my biology skills.
It makes so much sense. You did not become an economist or did not, abuse the trust of that early principal, but you used all those skills and it just shows up in all your work. If people follow you on social media, that kind of thing, there's amazing photography. Obviously, the art is just gorgeous and all of the subjects are natural subjects. And that's something I mentioned in my intro, that not only do you know how to faithfully render these things and make these life forms and mushrooms come alive in your work, but there's this scientific mind behind it that has a full understanding of exactly what you're looking at. And obviously that probably helps with the drawing of it.
I also choose carefully. I prefer to paint and study things that I have met, as you say in Swedish. Like, at least in Varmland, where I'm from, if you go out to the forest and you see a wolf, you don't go back and you say, I saw a wolf. You say, jag mötte varg, which means I met the wolf. You don't just observe, you meet them. So if you find mushrooms, you meet them as well. I met this mushroom,
It connotates such a different meaning and a different relationship with that natural thing when you say, I met them. Like, I felt their energy. It wasn't just, observing.
Yeah, so some of these cultural things are always part of the language, it's just baked into the whole package. As a Swede, I get many of these things for free. They're not me as a person, not only me, they're part of my culture. So I'm super grateful for that, oh my God.
Right, and that's why I loved laying the backdrop of your culture to give people an idea of where you come from and why this is so innate to you. Now, as you're doing these studies, how did you eventually transition your way into the art world? And now, you create your own artwork with beautiful natural themes. What was that progression like of going from schooling, doing field biology, to deciding to go out on your own and do your own art?
It was not smooth. After I graduated the gymnasium at 18, I was dead set on going to a real art school, a good reputation or something like that. I don't know. That's what I wanted. Yeah. So I applied and I applied and I applied. And I think I applied to 6 or 7 art schools around Sweden. And I was denied entry to all of them because they said that my work was too old-fashioned. They wanted contemporary art. They wanted me to... Yeah,
ridiculous.
They favored artists. So
ridiculous.
I thought so too. I felt very slighted. They favored artists who would do something modern, like video art or contemporary art, where you build a pile of scraps and you write a 7-page essay about how this scrap pile represents your feelings towards maternity or something like something weird like this.
Something that my aesthetic does not appreciate.
And I know this because, of course, I had friends my same age who also applied to art schools and they were all accepted. I knew what they were applying, what kind of projects they'd done. One girl, she'd filmed herself eating lots of cake and making a video about body issues, which is of course super important. But the art schools thought that these things are much more important than painting mushrooms and berries. I agreed in a way. Yeah, true. And I'm never going to be that person. I'm not going to be making video art or...
So an oddball artist even in the modern art world.
Yeah. Yes. So I never got into an art school. My siblings were like, well, why not design? You love book design, typography and things like that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. I love classic old typography. I'm going to apply to design school. So I did. This is just such life's irony, you say in Swedish, the irony of life. I picked out the most respectable design school in all of Scandinavia, one of the best in Europe, happens to be in Stockholm. And I sent in this half-ass thing. And the guy responsible for the design part of the school, he actually called me up personally and said, this typography is so good that I'm going to force you to finish the whole application because you've only done 50%. I usually don't do this, but I need to have you in this class. And I was like, really? I finished it and I was very privileged to be able to go to this very good design school. It did really change my life in a way.
So that's a lesson in that is always do kind of a half-ass job to apply to your favorite school and it's just going to work out.
Don't do that, kids.
So you went to design school and that was in Stockholm?
That was in Stockholm. So I moved to Stockholm and I had to learn big city life, which was an interesting time for me. It's different from the countryside now.
As the girl whose friends were ants and stink bugs, now moving to the big city.
Yeah, I did a terrible first impression that day. I remember when we were going to introduce each other and I didn't know, I don't know how to be cool. So I just hi, and I went on and on talking about some sticker collection that I had and my fantasy books that I love and stuff like that. And people
that's incredible.
Eyed, quickly branded as the fantasy nerd. But I was fine with that. That's who I am. But I had a great time. So after design school, of course, I should try to be a designer because that's what you do after you study design. I got headhunted by a really, really good packaging design agency in Stockholm, which some of my classmates were like, of course you just come here and steal our jobs, you countryside person, so they were a bit envious. So I happily started working there and quickly noticed that this is probably not for me. People were so nicely dressed every day, and they loved this job and they took it so seriously. And I could tell that I'm stealing this job for someone else.
It didn't fit with the essence of really who you are.
No, it didn't. Oh, I was so scared of phoning up my parents and telling them, oh, you remember when I moved to Stockholm and I studied for years and I got this really good job with a super nice entry salary for just being 26 years old? I decided to quit. I was super scared of telling them that. So it was the biggest relief when I told my mother, and hear that she was relieved too. She said, oh, I'm glad in a way you're telling me this, because I couldn't just picture you as a design agency, sitting on an office every day in front of a computer. Like, I'm actually happy that you understand. I was like, whew.
And just to be that accepting of like, hey, we know who you are as an essence of a person. We're not going to put our own expectations of what it is to be successful onto you. That's really important. And a lot of people's parents don't do that necessarily. And I can tell you from someone who worked in an office job in a cubicle under the lights, trying to climb a corporate ladder, you aren't missing anything. Yeah, I can tell you that you made the right choice.
That's comforting to hear. And I'm so glad that you found something you like better. I understand why some parents are like, no, you don't quit your job, or you insane, blah, blah, blah. Because making money is very important. And,
right.
I've noticed that when other people say like, Mom and Dad, I'm going to be an artist, that their parents are looking really scared for them.
Yeah.
You think that, oh, you're not going to make any money. But yeah, I was very fortunate. And I think that both my parents actually dabbled a bit in art themselves. Not my father, but his parents. And he's actually seen his parents have a good life. I think they also had, a sense of security in the profession with them, that if you're really determined, you can do this. And I think that's what you need. You need huge determination as an artist. And
absolutely.
you can't hit yourself over the head and call yourself stupid too often. Or you can't abuse yourself, because you are the vessel, the machine that you need to make your dreams come true. You can't hurt that vessel in a way.
That's a great insight.
You have to be caring about yourself, and you also have to be very, very determined and not let small things get you down, or you have to be really focused on doing things over and over again until they work. So I think, since I'm a pretty stubborn person, I think my parents were like, oh, someone's going to make it cheaper, all this, because you can't tell her what to do. Just go and do it anyway.
Right. And there's sometimes where you can't fight who you are and what your passions are. And it's better to run with what you're passionate about a lot of times than what you feel like will make you most successful in your head. You got to use that gut sense of who you are and follow that thread. You left that job and the world didn't collapse around you. And then
it got better.
It got better. I love that. And so when did you start doing your own work, and what did your personal early artwork or life as a professional artist look like?
Well, all artists, they have this trial of fire and brimstone, or whatever it's called, of like who you are. You have to find out like, who am I as an artist? I knew kind of that I was gonna dive deep into that. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're going to be an artist, you have to define like what kind of artist you are. And some people are like, I don't want to be defined. Sure, try it. Try to see how it goes. I mean, it's much easier if people know who you are through your art. And if you change that all the time, that works for some people, but you're also going to change crowd all the time. I mean, you want to bond with other people through your art. Isn't that what you want? You want other people to feel the same way you are about something. So anyhow, it took a while for me to find out who I was and what I wanted to do and like how I wanted to do it. And it sounds seriously like, how could painting a mushroom take time to figure out? That's not really what I was I was trying to figure out, like, is that what I really want to do? It was pretty clear to me that, I love biology. I love painting with gouache and aquarelle, watercolor and things like that. I'm a very social person. I like to talk a lot, if you haven't noticed. I'm like a very communicative. Can be good and bad, huh? But so I thought, like, what if I put all these things that I love and that I'm knowledgeable about and I'm good at in the same place? What will I get then? So that's kind of how it started. Then I told a friend, an older friend. She's like in her 60s now. Mm-hmm. Because I love older women. That's like some of my favorite friends because you can get such good advice from them. So I had a really hard talk with her, and I told her about this, and she actually told me, "That's good, but you also have to give something back."
Ah.
And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, this is what you do for you, but you have to also think, what can I do for others? The art I create, how can it enrich other people's lives some way? What can you give to society and to people?"
Right.
And that really, really made me super triggered in a happy way. Like, this is the last puzzle piece that I was missing. So I instantly started looking at making posters and prints that felt educational in some way.
Yeah.
Where people and I can meet, we meet, our interests and our passion meet in this poster, and it can give something to people. You look at it, you give it to a child, they can learn something, you can use it. Like, if you are knowledgeable, you can use my art to teach someone else. This art is not about me, it's a tool.
It imbues a lot of meaning and purpose into the work.
Yes, and that's what I was missing. And that's the last piece I needed to start creating. And this was a couple of years ago. It's like 5 or 6 years ago. So I had to save up money in order to do all of this because no one else has funded my stuff other than myself. So I calculated, how much money do I need to print these things? How much money do I need to paint it? Because just painting one of my posters, it takes over a month to just paint and plan one of the posters.
I can imagine. They're very intricate. They're very well laid out. The amount of hours that goes into it is apparent.
Well, thank you. It's comforting to hear also. So I looked at this plan, and I was like, oh, I need to save up money so I can work only on this for a couple of months. So I had to work like 2 years only to save up the money so I could start doing this. Because printing them is costly too. And of course, me being me, I just couldn't take a super cheap printer in China and send them here. Like, that's not sustainable. I can't do that. So I talked to there's a paper mill in Sweden, which is one of the most environmentally friendly paper mills in the world.
It would be.
Yeah. Because they even run, they make their own electricity from like a water mill and stuff like that. I mean, it's insane. And they make the paper from Swedish trees. And I was like, I have to print my posters and prints on Swedish trees made in this paper mill. So I talked to them, and then I talked to a printer because I wanted them to be printed traditionally, not digitally, but like with plates,
You and the analog, you don't always do things digitally. You like the analog processes.
Yeah. It just gives them so much more vibrant colors, and it's more environmentally friendly. And then each poster they print has to dry like 2 days or something. Oh, that makes me so happy.
Wow, each poster then is like its own unique piece of art. I mean, it doesn't feel as mass-produced with that kind of process behind it.
Exactly. Of course, it's costly. But I also wanted the posters to be affordable. I didn't want them to cost like $60 because if you want to teach people, you have to be able to afford this for your kids. You know?
Right.
It's not going to be that kind of art, which some people disagree with me. They said you should be more expensive. But I want you to be able to buy a couple of them for your kids,
Well, and that gets to that idea of who you want to be as an artist, right? You had to figure out for yourself what being an artist meant to you, what the purpose was going to be of your work to make decisions like that.
Exactly. You have to think about that too, like the whole world around it.
Yeah.
So pricing is a part of that. I mean, and I'm fine if I can stack away some money for the next production of stuff I want to do and also survive. I don't need like super fancy life. I'm happy with that. So that's where it started out. a couple of years ago, and I didn't know how to run a web shop. I knew nothing about this. And there was a lot of trial and error because, of course, I didn't want to have like environmentally friendly packaging either. So I visited these shopping malls that are a few bus stations away from where I live and asked them if I could gather their disposed plastic wrappings and boxes that they were going to throw away so I could reuse them.
Very resourceful.
Yeah, so that's where I started out. I mean, I saved money that way too. So most of the packaging I use today are made from recycled paper pulp. And now I can buy. I don't need to go and collect it because it takes a lot of time to do that. But I found sustainable places where I can buy packaging. So you have these many things to think about.
The subject of the paintings is the environment. And then that consideration, that love of nature, also runs through kind of the whole process that we're hearing about of being environmentally friendly, using environmentally friendly packaging. Now, the art itself, it's always hard to describe artwork when you're talking on a radio show. The art itself, though, is vibrant and full of color. You have a very specific style that make things jump out as, I want to say they're like organic, and the drawings sometimes feel almost soft, like you could feel what the texture of the mushroom that you're looking at. It's hard for me to put in the words because I'm not an artist per se, but I know how it makes me feel. So maybe what is the inspiration behind the current style of art that you have? Is this something entirely unique that you've developed over years? Were there artists you could reference or other inspirations? And then maybe the posters we're talking about, what are the compositions, or how do you decide what mushrooms and plants to put on there?
For starters, when I wanted to find myself as an artist, I decided that I shall look at no other artists. I wanted to feel like what I have is enough. I am complete. I can do this. And I also felt like when I tried to look at other artists, I got confused a bit. Because when you look at another artist's finished work, you don't really know how they got there. Like, I can see technique, of course, but I also don't know the decisions they made. How did they mix and blend the colors? I don't know these things. So in the end, I'm just going to try to mimic something without really knowing deeply like how they did it. So I found that to not be a very effective way of finding yourself, trying to find yourself in others.
You want to pull it from out of yourself, it sounds like.
Yes. And this was a way of telling myself that I am enough. I'm good enough. I don't need anything else.
Everyone can use that message.
Yeah. And I mean, I can explore, because it's about handcraft and technique. I had all the technical schooling as a child, so I have all of that to fall back on. I just need to work methodically to find out how I want to paint things. When I decided like the subjects, I wanted to make posters, I wanted to make this, I wanted to make that. I just started to paint things. Like I would paint like 20 Amanitas, Amanita muscaria, and in different kind of ways. And I would choose like, this one is good. I like this one. And I noticed that I like saturated colors.
Yes, that's the word. Your art has very saturated, deep colors.
Yeah, I like that. I like to put on many layers and make them feel really like, we have a word in Swedish that's called mustig, and that's when like a soup or stew has been brewing for a long time, so it's the flavor becomes really condensed and rich. Yeah. So you can use that word for colors as well. Like you've made a really, really rich sauce with like many flavors that just explode in your mouth. That's what I wanted. I like that when they looked like that. So I also ditched a lot of technical knowledge that I had been taught. Like, for example, watercolors, they have to be this and that, and gouache this and that. I just like, screw it. I'll just mix acrylics. I'll mix color pencils. I'll mix inks. I'll mix gouache, and I'll mix watercolor in any way I feel like it to make it as saturated and rich as possible.
Always the rule breaker.
Of course. Oh, goodness. It's a theme, isn't it? So when people ask me, I feel a bit sorry for them when they ask me, how did you do this? Can you tell me? And I'm like, yeah, put out a smorgasbord. That's another Swedish word, smorgasbord. Put out the buffet of all the paints that you like and use them And anyway, because some paintings I don't do the same way as I do other paintings. It's the result I'm after, not really the process. That's how that went about. And then I found this result that I liked. Then I started to making the posters. And then I noticed that sometimes I grew a bit bored. I would paint a mushroom in this style. So I was like, I'll paint the next one with only color pencils and just try to get the same result as the other one, just because I want to, it's for my sake.
Yeah, your own exploration. Yeah.
Yeah. Not every mushroom on one poster is painted with the same technique. They vary. And I also think that gives it an overall very organic feel, because the texture of a leaf is so different from the texture of a mushroom. So I decided to paint all the leaves with color pencils. Color pencils, they're quite dry.
Yes.
So, and you get a texture from them, and that fits the leaves very well. But the mushrooms, they're so moisty and damp. So
they need that stew.
Yeah, so they need gouache and watercolor and things like that to really look moisty.
Well, and one of the compositions that I really enjoyed are the biotopes. So maybe we can talk a little bit about what a biotope is and how that's become a focus of some of the more recent poster series.
Yes. I actually started out with biotopes when I had this idea that I was going to make these posters and prints and open up a web shop. I called field biology organization, and I asked them if they had any field biologists that would like to work with me. And I couldn't pay them now, but I could pay them later in posters. Just narrowed it down pretty quickly, I'm sure. So I got in contact with this lovely field biologist who's been helping me out making these biotopical posters. So she's called Cecilia. And I told her about, she doesn't have a website, and she works for the government. These things are governmentally funded here. Right. So it's not like I have a website that you can go and visit her or anything like that. So otherwise I would promote the crap out of her. But but so I told her about my vision, and I told her how I wanted to make these biotope posters, and she thought it was a great idea. So she helped me pick out the different signaling species. I don't have any vocabulary in English for these kind of things.
Well, that's or called a keystone species or an indicator species.
Okay. Oh, okay, good. Yeah, we call them a signaling species in English, but it's Swedish. Anyhow, so she helped me pick out lists of these, which that doesn't mean she gave me 10 species. There were still hundreds of species. Oh, goodness. So for each poster, I had to go through these hundreds of species, Google them, and then of course I visited the biotopes as well. Oh, it took such a long time to just make one poster. It was incredible.
So you have your own background in field biology, and still you were sent these lists of hundreds of different species and different animals and plants, and you had to do even more research.
I don't have that title. I'm not a field biologist. So I really wanted a professional person to talk to, and she's been great. So I noticed, okay, it takes 1 year to make one of these posters, but that's fine. I mean, it's nothing if you think about, back in the days, the botanists, and, it would take them 10 years to make a book. So I was like, that's fine. But I need to also make posters that are faster than this. So I started planning the biotope posters, and I had 10 of them planned out already. And that's 5 years ago.
Okay.
So I've made 3 by now. 3. I started working with 3 years ago, and I have finished the 4th one, but I can't print it at the moment due to the COVID-19 situation.
Due to everything going on. And when we talk about biotopes, these are unique environments or ecosystems. Now, are all the biotopes you're looking at based in Sweden?
Yes. I want to visit the biotope. Right. I took pictures and look at all the different species at different times a year. So I understood that, okay, it has to be in my native country for now, at least. It's better if I stick to what I know also. Yeah. The first ones I've done are based on places that I've lived. So I'll branch out later and go further up north to the even more Arctic region and so on. So so as you said, a biotope is a specific area where all the organisms are specific to that area, and they also live in a sort of symbiosis with each other. You have a specific type of soil depending on which minerals are in the soil, specific type of plants will grow. And depending on which plants will grow, certain insects will be attracted. And then birds will come because they like to eat this specific insect. And then you have the top predators who like to eat these birds that will come, and so on and so forth. So the species on my posters are species that belong together, that you can find in this specific habitat.
You had to do that work of picking the keystone species. I mean, when you're talking about hundreds or thousands of life forms to choose from, to pick just, how many are on each poster? Is it 10 or 20 or?
Yeah, it's in between 12 and 20, depending on how big and small they are.
So to pick keystone species that signify that biotope with just 12 to 20 life forms is a big challenge, but I think, it really works. When we were looking at some of the biotopes, the 3 you have already, it really makes a lot of sense. And you almost get a snapshot understanding of that environment. And it shows that interesting symbiosis is illustrated in the work. Now, what has the reception been by artists and even scientists? How has the work been received so far?
I am overwhelmed. I had such low hopes on this when I started with it. I mean, I was really telling myself in the most Swedish way possible that don't be sad if no one wants to buy your stuff. Don't be sad, because this is a dream and you do it for yourself. This is for you. And if anyone else likes it, it's a bonus. So I first started out with these biotope posters, and I sent them to this specific printer, who was going to print them in this specific way. And they called me back and they said, listen, your posters are 50 times 70 centimeters. But the papers that we get from the specific mill that you want us to get the papers from, we can fit 4 posters on one of these. You have only sent us 3 now. So that will be what we call spill in Swedish, which means we'll have to throw the empty place away. It's plates. So you put 3 unique plates on this.
So you have a waste of kind of that 4th.
A waste, that's what it's called. Yeah, you have a waste on each huge paper that will be where they could fit the 4th poster. So they said, can you quickly make another poster? And I was like, sure, And then I thought, I want to make a poster dedicated to my mother, my mushroom foraging mother. I hardly slept. I painted mushrooms day and night. And I made my first mushroom poster, which is called Matsvamp 1, or Edible Mushrooms 1, in my shop. It's sold out at the moment.
Yeah.
Groggy, deprived from sleep, I sent this to the printer and said, here's your 4th poster. And I didn't expect anyone to buy this. I just made it for my mom. I wanted to surprise my mother and my aunts, who grew up just like her, with this mushroom poster as a gift to them. The printers, they sent me back this poster, and I took a picture of me holding the poster. And I put it on my Facebook wall, which is private. I use Facebook very rarely, and I only have a couple of hundreds of friends, and it's private. So there was this one girl who saw this and shared it on a forum, and it just blew up. The next day, I opened my email, and I had almost 100 emails from people who wanted to buy this poster.
Wow.
And I was just like, what? And I wasn't a seasoned web shop owner. I hadn't even opened my web shop yet.
Yeah, you're overwhelmed. You're like, oh my God, you guys love it this much?
Yeah, I was like, how can this be? It's crazy.
More importantly, what did your mom think about it?
Oh, she loved it, of course. I mean, we're so synced, in what we like, she and I. So I sent it over, and she was just like, this is perfect. I had picked out the colors of the mushrooms after what she likes, and it's her favorite mushroom. So she was like, oh, thank you so much, honey. And she put it up in her home. That's where the mushroom posters started. I love mushrooms too. I didn't think that there were so many out there that wanted a mushroom poster. So I just started making loads of mushroom posters.
The amount of mushroom hunters and mushroom heads in the United States, and everyone loves them. So, I mean, you have a massive market of mycophiles that need this work.
That makes me so happy. Yeah, I mean, it's just been a couple of years of me doing this. It's 2 years of mushroom posters.
Are you guys in Sweden aware of kind of the explosion of mushroom love and mushroom mania that's happening in the States and in the UK, kind of in the West here?
We're starting to, yeah. I've noticed this in mushroom forums.
Yeah.
Swedish mushroom forums that I've been active in. And I've noticed how there's like 50,000 Swedes maybe in one of these mushroom groups.
Which is a lot for only 9 million people. It's a lot of people.
Yeah, but it's a mushroom loving country, you know. So,
right.
So, and I've noticed that they've taken on some of the American names of some of the mushrooms and just switched them to Swedish, because some mushrooms, they don't have like flavorful name, let's say that in Swedish, like the chicken of the woods, for example. What a lovely, cute name for a shroom. Chicken of the woods. It's so childish and lovely. I love it. And in Swedish, it's called sulfur bracket, which
sulfur
sounds
and
like
brimstone.
Yeah, which sounds like you're an alchemist and you're going to do something in your lab. It doesn't sound so juicy and edible. So people have been starting to call it like forest chicken or chicken of the woods. And they will say like the Americans do. And I would actually look at American recipes on how to cook it.
Wow. So American mushroom culture is starting to influence, as ancient a mushroom tradition as Sweden. I was really curious about that because I'm part of this huge explosion here. So for me, it's always interesting talking to someone who that tradition is embedded in their culture. And now to see that cross-pollination back, where we've probably been inspired mostly by Eastern Europeans and Scandinavians for our own mushroom culture here. So to think it cross-pollinates back is a fascinating topic.
That's so cool. I think
it's really cool. It's really cool.
Yeah, because why we are inspired by your recipes is also because here we have 6 months of winter with like 3 hours of sunlight. I mean, this is almost not endurable. So our foraging here is very focused on like pickled stuff or stuff that will last.
Sure.
So pickled mushrooms is a huge thing, or dried mushrooms, jams, and we have all sorts of things. But you're better at like enjoying the mushroom in the moment. Like there's so many nice, chicken of the woods recipes. Here we would probably have like pickle it, put it in
you find a mushroom, pickle it, keep it for winter.
Exactly. Dry it. Can it be dried? That's like the first question. Can you dry this mushroom here? So like in my own like cupboards here, there's just full of dried mushrooms.
I'm sure your forage cupboards are the thing of dreams. Just circling back to the art a little bit, I don't want to leave this part out. What was it like having your art in the most visited museum in Sweden? Coming from something where you're trying not to brag and you're trying to be humble.
I know. God, I wept so hard when they sent me an email. Like, I've only had this mushroom posters out for like a year and a half or something. I haven't been like contacting any like stores or anything like, take all my stuff. I was still like, oh my God, and someone likes this. It's incredible. But they had found out my stuff somehow and emailed me and said, hello, we would like to sell your posters at our Natural History Museum. And we would also like to organize an exhibition. Is that something you would like? And I just started weeping. Of course, I phoned them up and was like, yes, I'll do anything for you.
Right.
So not only is there a little museum shop holding my stuff, I also got to have this exhibition. This is one of the oldest natural history museums in Scandinavia. And they have these, I don't know what they're called in English, but they have these scenery build up from stuffed animals.
Okay, dioramas and things.
Oh yeah, dioramas. Yes.
Yeah.
They're so beautifully done and they're huge. And they're also like an educational hub for school classes. Almost daily they have school classes coming by to have like a field day at the museum. So they have these classrooms, beautiful classrooms where they teach the kids different things. So they also asked me if I wanted to be there and have a little mushroom dyeing workshop where you dye wool with mushrooms. So you can teach kids that. That was super fun.
Oh, so you've really been able to do that educational component and giving back component with your art.
Oh my God, I loved it.
I'm getting giddy just thinking about it. This is really exciting.
It was so much fun. That was a huge thing for me. I mean, I can't even talk about it. I was just like, wow, it's such an honor. It's such an honor.
One of those things that's hard to put into words.
Yeah, it meant so much for me. I am way too chatty to be a Swede. Like when people came there to look, I'm like, hi! And Swedes are like Finns and Russians. Russians are better, actually. They're more talkative and open. But people are very like closed off here. They don't like warm chatty people that much. So I was trying my best at the exhibition not to scare people off because I was going to have a talk. But I could, like, as I had the talk, I could tell people, like adults, they dropped off one by one, like, oh, she's too much. She's too much. But I've always been too much, for this country. They don't always.
She is too much stamina. For Sweden. She is too much. I love it. I love people that are too much. I love people that are weird and oddballs and do their own thing and blaze their own trails. Those are the best people, the most exciting people. And having learned more about you and hearing you here, you are definitely like, well, you're one of those people that is interesting and cool and keeps the world interesting.
Thank you.
I didn't pick all that up. I didn't pick up your whole personality just from the art. So I feel privileged to have an opportunity to meet you and get to know you. And you are just a delight. Now, I want to draw toward a little bit of promotion and where people can find you. We've been talking about your amazing art, and I'm sure people are already resonating with who you are and your message. So where can people find you to go support you to get your art?
They can find my art through my website, my web shop specifically, which is called Saga Mariah Design.se. In Sweden, we don't have .com, .com. We have SE for Sweden. It's my name plus design at the end. And that's my web shop. And then you can also follow me on Instagram, where I post stories daily, and I post photos of my forest walks, and I post pictures of my paintings. And hopefully in the future, I will also make some YouTube videos about foraging in Scandinavia. Yeah, I've been gifted a camera and some equipment for this.
Oh, please do, because now we've all got a taste of what it's like, and I want to be there and see more. And your stories are that little bit of window. My partner Shakti and I always watch your stories. You're traveling through Scandinavia, where you're exploring. There was one where you were at an old Norwegian church that we fell in love with, this church that was made with no nails. So I highly recommend people follow your page, not just for the mushrooms and the art, but just to get a snapshot in the life of Saga Mariah. And it's a beautiful world.
Well, thank you. I went to this mining district last summer, which I made a super long story about, which this is on a highlight on my Instagram. I went to this mining district, which is one of the most mineral-rich places on the earth. And it's in Varmland, where I grew up. And this mining district is called Långban. So there's 15 mines, and next to it, there's the mining village. And in this mining village, a person named John Erickson was born. And he migrated to the United States and played a huge role in the Civil War.
Really?
So, yeah, and apparently there's a statue of him in New York, of John Erickson from Långban village in Värmland. And I was like, what?
See, we can make historical discoveries just from watching your stories. You're teaching me about American culture from your stories of Scandinavia.
It's such a cool thing. Because my mother, she grew up in a village next to the mining village where they had the iron works. So they had the mines where they find all the iron ore. And then they send it off to the next village, which is where my mom grew up, where they had the iron works. I don't know. It's just so weird that the person from this village played such a huge role in the American Civil War.
Varmland has been central to American history. We didn't even know it.
No.
Well, before this podcast even, because obviously this is a huge part of American history now. So what are the future projects and plans, both in art, but anything else you want to talk about? Any projects, any future plans that we need to know about? Well,
I've changed them a bit since this virus outbreak happened, because it's interfered with some of my plans a bit. So I've looked at projects that I was actually going to do this autumn, and I've moved them to now instead, which is like, what do people do when they're home all day? Maybe I can make something mushroomy for them to do. So I've been looking at making different mushroom games, like, printed games, not video games.
We love mushroom games.
Right? There's too few. It's not enough of them.
I was going to say none exist that I know of, but I love it.
I know, on Google I haven't found a single one. So I'm looking into, right now, doing sketches on making some different mushroom games.
I have 2 little nieces. I want to buy them mushroom games for Christmas. So I'm going to encourage you to make your mushroom games and share them with the planet.
Thank you.
God, I'm glad I asked. So I always like to leave my listeners with a few insights. I think we've got a lot of insights into who you are, got a great window into who you are, but I always like to end with a couple little questions that leave us with a deeper impression of Saga Mariah. And so why don't you tell us just one mushroom that you love and why? It doesn't have to be a favorite. It could change tomorrow. It doesn't even have to be one you eat, but one mushroom you really love and why.
Okay, so one of my current favorites is it's called violspindling in Swedish. It's a cortinarius that is purple. And I don't really remember the full scientific name for it. But I love cortinarius. It's a huge family, but they're so cool. But there's this purple one. It looks like a jewel in the forest. And last autumn, my mom brought me to this new part of the forest where she had been walking, and she said, "You have to see this." And we walked into this part of the forest, and there they were. Viol means violet in Swedish, so it's like violet cortinarius is what we call it. And like Scandinavian forests, they have this huge, thick carpet of moss. And there's one moss that is kind of like a feather, looks like a little bit like a feather. We call it house moss because we use it to insulate our houses here. So each year it grows like a little leaf, and then the next year there's another leaf on it. So if you pick them in the forest, you can see how many leaves are on top of the other leaf to tell their age. They just keep on growing and growing for hundreds of years. So this is thick carpet of green moss, and just in the midst of this green moss, there were these like purple jewels growing. Like they're so purple, wow. It doesn't look real. Right now, they're my favorite mushrooms just because I met them. I went with my mom into the forest and I met the violet cortinarius.
You met the violet cortinarius jewels on a bed of ancient moss.
Yes.
That's a lovely story. Now, what would you tell to an 18-year-old Saga Mariah?
Oh, I would tell her it's going to be okay. She was so afraid that she wasn't going to find any friends in this world because she's so weird. And I would just tell her it's going to be fine, honey. You're going to have so many awesome friends that this shouldn't be anything to worry about. You're going to have the best time. That's what I would tell her, because that's what's her worry. You know, I just graduated school and I was maybe going to move somewhere, like to Stockholm or somewhere. And she was terrified that people were going to hate her, but it didn't happen.
Oh, I love that. I think a lot of us at 18 years old needed to hear that. That it's going to be okay. Yeah. You're going to find your tribe. You know, just keep doing you, and the people that you're supposed to meet will come to you.
Yeah. It's going to be so much better than you ever expected. That's what I would like to tell her. Life is going to be awesome.
Yes, indeed. Final question. What is the lasting impact that you hope to make with your artwork?
I hope to invoke curiosity. I have a lot of natural born curiosity as I was a kid, and I think most kids are very curious. And I hope that if you're not yet that super interested in all the weird, amazing things that grows in nature, I hope that my art can awaken some of that curiosity, that you look at it and think, what, really? That's why I made the Peculiar Shrooms series.
Yeah.
Which is just like constellation of peculiar shrooms. And people usually ask me, why peculiar? Why didn't you put like edible and then poisonous and things like that? I'm like, no, because look at them. In Swedish, they're actually called spännande svamp, which means exciting mushrooms. Mushrooms that awake excitement in you.
We want exciting mushrooms.
Yeah, so in English, I decided to call them peculiar because I think it sounds mysterious. But I want people to feel excitement, and I loved when they look at the Peculiar Shrooms posters and people who have no knowledge of mushrooms, they ask me, are these real? Oh, did you make these up? I was like, no, they're real. All of this one too. Yeah, that one too. They grow up there. They're real. What? And I love that. And that's how I hope that people will feel about the natural world. You know, if they don't have a natural connection to it from an early age, I hope they will look at my art and go, really? Wow, I want to know more.
You truly are being an educator with your work if you're invoking curiosity, because that's what educating is all about, is sparking curiosity in people so they want to learn more themselves. You know, and I hope my work does that a little bit, and I definitely get that from your work. When we see your amazing drawings, your amazing pieces of art, I definitely feel a curiosity sparked. I think it's doing its job.
Oh, thank you. I've listened to every episode of your podcast. It's great.
Oh my gosh.
I hope everyone listens to it.
Well, that is humbling, and I'm glad I've had the opportunity to be able to speak with you and get to know you, because you've been someone I have followed on social media for years now. Again, we're someone who stalked you through your stories and took journeys with you. So it's just lovely to getting a chance to meet you and realizing you're, just such a great person.
Aw, thanks for having me. This was a great experience. We have to do part 1, part 2, part 4, part 6.
I was going to say it's pretty much mandatory that we're going to have to do more, because we just scratched the surface on some of the information you sent me about Scandinavian culture, and I want to hear it all.
Awesome, because I'm looking forward to those follow-ups.